the link for you. It'll be available to everyone so that you can access it following the presentations. For our presenters who have PowerPoint presentations, I will be providing those as well following the webinar. You can get them from the presenters or you can get them from me. You just need to email, and we'll be happy to provide those to you. We already had the East Coast webinar. I know some of you have those materials already and have access to the recording. If you would like that, please go ahead and let me know, and I can also provide it for you. We do have the COVID-19 resource page on the website, so please go there if you'd like to search for additional resources and guidance. The recording from the last webinar is also there, and this one will be placed on the website as well. And the 2 additional webinars we have left will also appear on the website. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Jeff Ojeda to you. He'll go ahead and tell you about what he does, his title, and we'll start with the presentation, and then we'll go with Jamie, and then I believe Carrie Byers is also joining us. And she will introduce herself following that as well. And also Michael Santos. Hello, Michael. So we'll go ahead and start with Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Ojeda, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all. I know that everyone has lots of things going on, and it seems that everyone is busier than ever with the changes that have come around in terms of quarantine and COVID-19. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I am the Utah State Board of Education McKinney-Vento Director, as well as the Migrant Ed Director for the state. And I've had plenty of opportunity to kind of meet with and speak to the people, my liaisons that are out at school districts in regards to what is going on. And as I have done so, they have wanted me to share some information that they thought was valuable to them in our conversations. So the first part is just a reminder in regards to the CARES Act that was signed on March 27th of this year in regards to helping support cities and in particular education in regards to the COVID-19 issues that are happening. There is a specific amount set aside for funding education, and specifically it's meant to deal with anything in regards to COVID-19. So if there are any ties to any expenses that can be proven, obviously, but that become expenses because of what's going on, the CARES Act, in theory, should cover that for states and districts. And that money is coming from the federal government to state school offices, and then the state office of education will get that out to school districts in that way. The other part of mentioning some valuable resources for you is the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. They have some questions to consider, a document that has been really useful for some of my people, and I wanted to mention that to you here. I do have all of this in a PowerPoint presentation, by the way, so I'll be sharing that with Tisha, and we can either post that or she can mail it out to everybody who participates today. The other reminder that I wanted to make is in regards to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And they have a document entitled The Availability of COVID-19 Waivers. It's an important document I think everyone in regards to homelessness should read. They have some valuable information there as well. And again, in the presentation that I'll be sharing with you guys, the PowerPoint presentation, you'll have links there as well. There's another piece that I wanted to bring to your attention, and that was in regards to the National Law Center. on homelessness. They have some great resources available too, that many of my people in the state have used to have conversations with either city authorities or specific services to help support our homeless kids in particular, but homeless families as well. They have some specific recommendations that are pretty great, including that sweeps of facilities or places where homeless people are living, that those sweeps be stopped, that our homeless population is not forced to congregate in a shelter specific to something other than what's already been made available, or if they are asked to move, that they be placed in hotels and motels and trailers and RVs where they can follow the guidelines that have been given for social distancing. So you want to make sure that that's there as well, and they have some great recommendations on the site. They do also have a page specifically in regards to LGBTQ plus rights under the current situation. So that's important to recognize as well, as many of our youth population in the homeless setting are a part of that community. So we want to make sure that they're looked after as well, and that they not only know their rights, but that you know them as well, so that you can be advocates for them. The only other thing that I would suggest you have a look at on that page, that website, is a page that they have in regards to guidance, and it's CDC guidance actually that they're quoting on the Law Center for Homelessness website. And specifically, unless individual housing units are available, do not clear encampments during community spread of COVID-19. So encourage the spacing of tents, ensure that bathroom facilities are made available. I know in some of our cities we had some issues where public bathrooms were closed and there was no place for our homeless population to be able to use a restroom. And that became an issue that had to be dealt with actually from some of our district liaisons who advocated for some of our students who are in those situations. So please keep those things in mind as well. Utah's response to all that's going on comes in a three-wave pattern. This came from the governor of Utah, and our superintendency became a part of that conversation and adopted the same view, and that is that we're looking at this whole situation as a three-part wave. The first wave being the part in which we are living under now, that is the quarantine and the trying to figure out how to address student needs in a way that can actually meet their needs, and discovering all the holes and all of the issues that were already in place kind of be exacerbated by the current situation. So we see ourselves looking at the end of that, or cresting that first wave. And then the second would be to actually bridge those gaps and ensure that we can safely and appropriately educate our kids to the best of our ability given the situation. And then lastly would be to kind of clear everything out. So we don't have a timeline for that. We're kind of going on a day by day kind of thing, as all of us are, I assume. But that's kind of the situation within our state. And the challenges that we've really seen kind of come to light have been the bathroom situations for our homeless kids and families. As I mentioned, we had to have liaisons advocate with city officials in order to either reopen certain bathroom spaces or provide portable toilets for our homeless populations. And thankfully, those conversations came out successfully, but it was really interesting to see that the majority of our cities didn't have that population in view as they were making some decisions. And so it was up to us in education to actually point some of those things out for them. One of the other big issues that's come up with us is getting kids online, as most of our education has gone to online learning. we find that there are a lot more issues, even inner city issues, with getting kids online than we previously thought. So we do have those rural spaces where we know it's really difficult to get internet service anywhere. There are some of our towns in really rural areas where literally there is one spot in the city where people line up to stand so that they can make a cell phone call so that the cell service is actually present. So in cases like that, we've had a number of things happen where community businesses have stepped up to provide online service for families to be able to reach out, even if it was that they had to get to a parking lot to get on the company's Wi-Fi. But we've also had districts provide hotspots and one-to-one computers for all of their kids, whether that be a Mac, not a MacBook, Chromebook or an iPad or something of that nature to get kids online when necessary. But they have also included hotspots to families and given those out as well for families to use when it's been necessary. There is a call from our state superintendency in regards to grading and getting kids to do their work online, their classwork. And that is that no kid will be penalized for not being able to do online work. And because of the issues that we are aware of, and that not every kid has access immediately as teachers would like, or as we would like in education, we have to make arrangements for students in those situations as well. So we want to make sure that no kid is penalized for that. And that actually came not only from our state superintendency, but also was mentioned in several of our governor's reports out in public press conferences, so that everybody was aware of that. And another issue has been meals. And it's not that we give kids meals or don't give kids meals. The issue is, how do we handle being able to provide both a lunch and a breakfast for families when we're being told that schools need to be giving out both of those at the same time? And if you're not in housing and you don't have a place to store that, what do you do with it? So these are several of the challenges that we've faced as a state and that we continue to look at. But I think, like everybody else, we're doing the best to make sure that we can meet kids' needs and meet them where they're at, not where we would want them to be in the situation. Not academically, obviously, but in the situation of being able to access education. So with that, Tisha, I'll turn the time back over to you. And I don't know if you want to take questions now or after everyone's presented.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll take questions at the end. I do see we do have one question in queue, and we'll address it as soon as the presenters are done. I do know offhand there are a couple of resources available to you. One of them has been sent out. No Kid Hungry is a grant that can be applied for that a number of schools and school districts have been doing. But we'll get to your question in more detail in a minute. And also, I know right now offhand we'll be able to provide some resource links for you. Next up is Jamie. Jamie, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon to some of you. I'm Jamie Reif. I know quite a few of you actually on this call. It's good to see everyone. I hope you're staying safe. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. I am a former homeless liaison as well as a former state coordinator, but as well helped develop a technology that I'm going to share with you today that is called Purposity. Purposity is an app I helped develop while I was a homeless education liaison. Tisha, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, so and Purposity is, like I said, something I helped develop while I was a homeless education liaison. And during the times of COVID-19 and some of the limitations and the challenges that's presented to the work that you do, it's actually become much more relevant. And so I kind of just wanted to walk through it today and just offer it to you as a resource. I do just want to say up front, it is a free tool. Like, there's no charge for school districts or nonprofits to use it. It saves you a ton of time. And again, it's a really safe way to serve families and students during COVID-19. So I want to talk a little bit about where it came from. When I was doing work as a homeless education liaison, what I found is I would go out and talk about students and families experiencing homelessness to my community, and everyone would want to help, but I didn't have a way to like leverage them to find a way to really like efficiently get what I needed exactly when I needed it. So in 2015, I was working outside of Metro Atlanta, and I reached out to a friend of mine, and we started developing a tech solution around this issue. So what we knew was that there were thousands of people like me in school districts across the country that had needs that were being vetted by us. And then we just needed a way to get it out to our population or to our community. And so we helped develop Purposity. And Purposity, the name comes from purpose and generosity. That's the two words kind of put together, Purposity. And so at first it was just this really simple text line that we piloted with 3 of our school social workers in my district. And again, it worked really, really well. People would get 1 text message a week. They could click through, read a story about an individual, one of our students or families in need, and they can click a link and purchase the item for the family. So we started piloting it in 2016, in the 16-17 school year. What we found is it worked really well. Like, we ended up helping over 600 families in my district. There was over $18,000 in donations. It was everything ranging from, you know, a pair of shoes for a student to non-perishable food items to even beds. School social workers were able to go into homes and see that a child needed a bed to get them off the floor, mattresses, small household items, things like that. And we had saved my school social workers a little over 1,100 hours. And so from there, it just started to kind of really catch fire. And in 2018, we started developing the actual Purposity app. We do have users from across the country. We have them in several countries. The app has now been featured in Forbes. It also, as of yesterday morning, was on the Today Show, which is really exciting. We had a huge day yesterday. Intel, Georgia Power both use us for employee engagement for some of our corporate features. And then a lot of the largest nonprofits as well as school districts in the country use us as a way to really get very specific items, such as Make-A-Wish, Atlanta Public Schools. A lot of the other large schools also use us. And so I want to talk a little bit more about how it works. So this is the actual app. You'll see it's kind of scrolling through. When you land on your page, you can see needs. There's some stories for you. See the most urgent needs. You can click on following for the organizations that you follow. Now, because we were on the Today Show yesterday, all the needs have been met for the organizations I follow, which is a great problem to have. And then you can kind of scroll, and the next tab will be just stories. It's kind of like an Instagram feed with small posts from around the country on different things. Then the next tab is a list of all the organizations, and you can click in and see them and actually follow them. And then on the next tab, we have a Teams function where people can actually create teams. So like different companies or different organizations create a team and do good together. And then on the very last tab is your profile. So that keeps track of all the needs that you've met. You can set a goal for yourself. You also can kind of scroll and see all the different people that you've helped and all the different needs you've helped fulfill. And one of my favorite features about the app is you can click on it and you'll see there's an actual thank you message. And this is a really incredible feature. What this does is when people like you, like a homeless education liaison, actually receives the item, they're able to take a picture of it. So you can see this is a picture of some pillows that I bought, and then send a thank you message. So it says, right about now, you're making someone's day. The Purposity needs you met was delivered to the family yesterday, and we just wanted to say thanks for making a difference. And so the user gets that via notification, and then it kind of lives on their wall, which is a really unique feature of Purposity. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are today and then how you can get involved. So right now we have over 90 cities with live needs. We've helped over 30,000 students and families, and we've helped redirect and save staff across the country about 66,000 hours, which is incredible because that's time that you can give back to your students and families in other ways where you're not chasing down resources. So how it works basically is a school district or nonprofit kind of applies to be a partner with us. And then they go through a vetting process, and then they are given rights to submit needs for items from Amazon. So if you're a homeless education liaison, and say you have a student that needs a pair of shoes, you're actually able to sit down with that student if you want to and choose a pair of shoes on Amazon and then submit that information to us. via link as well as a story. Now, I do want to say no PII is ever shared with us. You don't have to share students' names or anything like that, but you just share a couple of details about why the student needs the shoes. So then that comes to us. We craft the actual message that people will read, everything that goes in the app. And then once a week, we send out a notification of the people that are following you of your needs. And then once someone purchases it, we actually buy the item on Amazon and we ship it directly to you. Now, one of the ways that this has changed during COVID is for a lot of school districts, we're either shipping directly to the school social worker, or the homeless education liaison at their home address. And then some districts have made the choice, working through their legal department, to share the shipping address of the family or student because it is directory information and just getting written consent from the parent to be able to share that information. So what we're able to do is actually direct ship to the family in need without you having to actually touch it, which is a really great way to get resources to your families. And again, if it's available on Amazon, we're able to ship it to the family for you. So kind of how to get started. In a minute, I'm going to share that interest form with you. And there's a web page that kind of explains everything more in depth because I don't have like a full hour like I normally do to go through this with everyone. So you can go to the website I'm about to show you, read about how it works. There's a lot of information there specifically for school districts. And we're very accustomed to the types of questions that you'll probably have internally. And then once you decide to launch, you'll just complete the interest form and ask you a couple of questions about who you are, your website, your information. And then what you'll want to do is get some internal support. So that usually looks like your director of communications, maybe your superintendent, definitely whoever your direct supervisor is, to help you do number 3, which is build followers and unlock. So because Purposity is free, one of the things we do ask though is for each organization to kind of build a little follower base. So based on the number of needs you're going to think you're going to be posting every week and how many people you want to have access, we'll kind of work with you on a goal. And it's usually somewhere between 150 and 500 people to get signed up. And we have a whole launch kit, an entire process to help you do that. And then once you hit your follower goal, we send you online training materials that are at your own pace. You guys just get trained and you're able to actually post your needs and get going on that. So that's kind of a really fast overview of Purposity. If you want to directly visit the website, you can just go to about.purposity.com. And in the upper right-hand corner, there's a menu and you can click on it and just go to the organizations page. Or if you have your phone and you want to open it up and you can open your camera app, you can scan this QR code and it will take you directly to that page on your phone. And then we are on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you want to give us a follow, there's always information updates as well there. And then you can always email me. My email is jamie@purposity.com. And that is it. Thank you, Tisha. I will stop sharing and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jamie. I did provide the information that was in one of our newsletters regarding Purposity in Q on the chat, and also the direct link that Jamie was talking about in chat in Q. This information will also be available afterwards and will be available in the recorded link as well that you will all be receiving. Thank you so much, Jamie. Also, I don't know if Jamie mentioned or not, but they were just on the Today Show a couple of days ago highlighting Purposity. So congratulations on this.
It's been a crazy week. Yeah. So
yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here.
And Carrie Byers, I noticed that you're on the line. You're up next. If you could introduce yourself and go ahead and start your presentation, and that will be followed by Michael Santos. Again, you can put your questions in queue as you have them, and they'll be addressed in the order in which they appear. Carrie?
Sorry, all. I was having trouble unmuting myself, which I'm sure we all hear a lot these days because it's difficult to deal with all of your technology. Hi, I'm Carrie Byers. I'm the Director of Illinois Policy at the Ounce of Prevention Fund here in Chicago, Illinois, beautiful Chicago. And I'm going to be giving you just an overview of the what we know about the early care and education system currently and the COVID-19 response. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen. so that I can go through my presentation. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Tisha, can you see that okay?
You are hooked up.
Fabulous. Okay. So I want to just start by giving a little information about childcare at the federal level. So I heard Jeff mention the CARES Act, which is one of our federal stimulus bills. The CARES Act did include $3.5 billion in supplementary discretionary funds that went to states, territories, and tribes for their childcare subsidy programs, which you'll hear as CCDF, or Child Care and Development Fund. That money can be used in various ways, including continuing payments to childcare providers if they have decreased enrollment or closures, providing childcare assistance to essential workers without regard to income eligibility requirements, assisting childcare providers with cleaning and maintenance activities, anything that would help them maintain or resume operation of the program, and of course, any other allowable use of CCDF funds. As you know, the CARES Act also had a number of provisions there for loans and other things through the Small Business Administration. And since most childcare programs are small businesses, they are eligible for those kind of resources. So looking at the state and community level response, again, every state, every community is going to be different. So it's hard for me to say exactly what's happening in your community. But on the whole, I think we saw that many, if not most states, either closed or restricted operations in some way for their childcare programs. And that might look like reduced group sizes or only providing care for certain children, including children of essential workers. I've seen pretty much everywhere at least some provisions to continue providing care to children of essential workers. And that might look like having emergency licenses to operate. A few states have, and cities actually have launched partnerships with companies like care.com so they can match children or families that are still working with childcare that comes to their home. A lot of states are providing incentives and extra supports to childcare programs and staff in order to maintain operations. I've seen a few examples. I know North Carolina is one where children experiencing homelessness and foster children are considered priority groups to continue having access to childcare. And then I think in recent days, we're starting to see some chatter online about reopening childcare. So not that I think that's happening, anytime in the next couple of weeks, but people are really starting to think about what that will look like and probably some sort of phased in approach. I mentioned in the previous slide those Small Business Administration supports. So what we're hearing is that that's been a major challenge for childcare providers accessing. So that's, I think, something we're still working on. There's a link here at the Hunt Institute, which I think has a really good summary of what's happening in state. So it's organized by state. And if you go to that link, you can look up your state and see exactly kind of what's the current status of policies. Moving on to Head Start and Early Head Start. So the Federal Office of Head Start has not required Head Start programs to close, but the vast majority have elected to close or were required to close because of other state requirements. Early Head Start and Head Start programs are still providing services to families during the closures to the extent practicable. In addition, the USDA waived group setting meal requirements for the child and adult care food programs. So many Head Start programs are continuing to provide food for families via delivery or distribution sites. Office of Head Start is not recommending that home-based services continues, but they are encouraging programs to use virtual communication to support families. And then back to the CARES Act, there was $750 million included there for Head Start and Early Head Start for coronavirus-related needs. And some of that is that $500 million is for supplemental summer programs so that those Head Start programs that would normally close over the summer can continue operating, and that they have a priority for enrolling currently enrolled children who are entering kindergarten in the fall and children with individualized education plans for those programs. So considering that there's a possibility of some summer programs where there might not have been before, I think it's really important that if you're in a position to continue referring children to Early Head Start and Head Start programs, please do. As I mentioned before, they are still going to be receiving some critical supports from Head Start, and that will make them eligible for those supplemental summer programs as well as continued enrollment in the fall. Also, if you're in a position, to advocate for children experiencing homelessness to be included as a priority population for enrollment in those supplemental summer programs, you can reach out to the Office of Head Start on that. If you haven't already, reaching out to your early Head Start and Head Start programs in your community, I think these are often really overlooked community resources. There's a lot of opportunities to partner with these programs on food and supply distribution and just collaborative support to families. And then I've included a link here if you want to have more information about the current status of Head Start and early Head Start. I wanted to touch a little bit on preschool. This is going to vary from state to state. If you have a school-based pre-K program, if schools are closed, of course, pre-K programs are closed. Community-based preschool is also generally closed if childcare is closed in a state. We're seeing some offerings of remote learning for early childhood. Of course, connectivity is still a concern for families experiencing homelessness. And then I heard Jeff talk a little bit about the funds that are available through the CARES Act for state education agencies and through the Governor's Education Relief Fund. Just wanted to highlight here that these are funds that can be used to support pre-K programs and, of course, McKinney-Vento programs. Okay, sorry, home visiting. So our home visiting programs, since these are programs where a parent educator goes into a home typically and works with an expectant family or family with a very young child, an infant or a toddler, these programs are not, for the most part, are not still doing in-person visits with families, but most are at least attempting to continue supporting families during this time. I had a hard time finding a kind of broad listing of what's happening in every state and community, but I saw that 0 to 3 did have a list of what they know from states, so you can click there to learn what's going on in your state. Most of our major home visiting models have provided some guidance on how to conduct home visits virtually during this time. Additionally, I've included a link here to the coronavirus FAQs that the Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting, or MACV, which is a federal home visiting program active in every state. You can read more about what home visiting programs are doing and what might be available. And then Child Trends had a nice piece here on telehealth and home visiting. Looking at our Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA Part C and Part B 619, this is our early intervention program for infants and toddlers with disabilities and delays and early childhood special education for children 3 to 5. I think the important thing to note here is that many young children with disabilities and their families are without critical special education and EI supports during this time. Obviously it's really difficult to continue providing the kinds of supports that students were receiving in schools, or in the case of EI, therapists were going out to homes and sometimes childcare programs to deliver those services. And I know there was a little bit of confusion at first about what exactly needed to be done for children with disabilities, but there is a supplemental fact sheet out from ED that reaffirms the rights of students to receive educational instruction during this time. And I put the link here if you wanted to read about it. Early intervention services, again, this is varying state by state as well. Some states and communities you're seeing EI delivered virtually, also through kind of a telehealth model. And then I've listed here a website from the Division of Early Childhood under the Council for Exceptional Children. They have a nice resource page related to COVID-19 where you can get, I think, any and all relevant updates related to early intervention and early childhood special education. And then before I share some additional resources, I did just want to mention here some post-COVID-19 concerns or considerations for the early childhood system. So I think we have to recognize that when this is all over, both the supply and demand for early childhood programs will be changed. I think we have a particular concern about the childcare system and losing a potentially a tremendous amount of capacity from that system, meaning fewer slots will be available. There'll be a lot more competition. As I mentioned, most of our childcare programs are small businesses, and they're really struggling right now. It's a razor thin margin in childcare, and I think we expect that many will be lost from the system. I think similarly, we have concerns about the stability of the workforce. Our early childhood educators are already very underpaid, and many are out of work. Some might not return to their jobs, and that will further exacerbate some of the capacity problems we're seeing. And kind of all that taken together, it will be really important for us to be really vocal about the need to intentionally prioritize children experiencing homelessness and other children and families that face barriers to early childhood programs as we come out into recovery post-COVID-19. With less capacity overall, we're going to have to work really hard to ensure that children continue being served. And then I'll leave here with some resources. The Alliance for Early Success has a nice state-by-state compilation of what's happening in various early childhood programs. The First 5 Years Fund has a good overview of the CARES Act. Bipartisan Policy Center, actually, I thought many of their resources related to COVID-19 were extremely useful, even just personally, like being able to understand what's happening with unemployment, with the Small Business Administration loans. Childcare Aware of America has a number of COVID-19 resources also for both providers and for families. And then the CDC did release guidance for early childhood programs that are continuing to operate during this time. And if you have any questions at all, you're welcome to email me, Carrie Byers, or my colleague, Asia Kennedy. If you have a specific question for your state or community, we're happy to do some research and kind of figure out how we can help. And so that's all I've got.
Thank you, Carrie. Next up is Michael Santos. Michael, if you could introduce yourself and go ahead and present. And then following Michael, we will have time for plenty of questions. So please put your questions in queue if you have any. And if not, there will be additional questions that we'll be able to address. Thank you, Michael.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Santos. I'm a registered legal aid attorney at Bay Area Legal Aid. We're based here in San Francisco. And as all of you know, San Francisco Bay Area is one of the first jurisdiction in the country to implement shelter-in-place order. And you can probably tell that from my haircut or lack thereof. I briefly want to go over the work that I'm doing at Bay Area Legal Aid. And really go over some of the issues that we've seen and how important it is to partner with folks like you doing work with families, youth, and children on the ground. And so Bay Area Legal Aid, or Bay Legal as we call it, works across different counties here in the Bay Area. So we have about 5-6 offices across the Bay Area, and we serve mostly low-income individuals and families, and we work on various legal issues, so immigration, public benefits, housing, family law, domestic violence, and my focus specifically is housing eviction defense in the San Francisco area. And one of the interesting things that has worked well for us since the COVID-19 crisis began is the work that we do in terms of providing legal services to our clients by partnering with a social worker in-house. And so there has been a lot of challenges, both internally, but also work navigating the court system once the shelter-in-place order took effect. And I'm happy to talk to you offline about those or brainstorm any ideas on how to get around some of the challenges that we've experienced, technologically, but also working with clients remotely. But one thing that I really want to flag for you is that when you're talking about housing issues and eviction in particular, there's really no, there is a nationwide eviction moratorium, and that's actually included in the CARES Act that my colleagues have referenced. Section 4024 of the CARES Act talked about imposes the temporary eviction moratorium, and there's also a moratorium on fees and penalties related to non-payment of rent. And so the eviction moratorium is actually in effect for 120 days, and that begins on March 27, which is the date that the law passed. However, and I think this is really important to remember, the temporary eviction moratorium only applies to certain subsidized housing. So that's public housing program, Section 8 housing choice voucher program, and the project-based voucher programs, and then Section 8 moderate rehabilitation program. And so it's really important if you're working with clients who have experienced homelessness in the past or housing unstable, who are currently receiving some form of subsidized housing, that there are specific rules and that there is an eviction moratorium with cases involving non-payment. And non-payment of rent is really the biggest chunk of cases that I work on in the housing unit here in San Francisco. And it's really important because I think the work that we do with our social worker, and I think with our local partners, even with school partners, is making sure that the families, children, and youth are connected to important resources that could actually help them get stabilized. Right now, I'm glad to report that evictions have slowed down, and I think that is, I can't speak to with what's happening in other jurisdictions, but here, at least in San Francisco, we've seen a slowdown in the number of eviction cases being filed in court, and that's because we have additional eviction moratoria on the state level and then on the local level. And so for those of you in other jurisdictions, I highly recommend to check any guidance that you receive from your state or even local county governments in terms of what exactly is included in, if you have an eviction moratoria and what that includes. Here in the Bay Area, there is an eviction moratorium for non-payment of rent, which I think is great because a lot of our clients are impacted financially and emotionally by the COVID-19 crisis. However, if there is an issue about domestic violence or nuisance or public health and safety, those cases are still allowed to proceed. And so, if you're working with a family where they may actually fit into what we call an exception case, so if there's a public health and safety concern, they may still face eviction even though we're in the midst of this global pandemic. And I do want to highlight the importance of working with our social worker because as an attorney, when I deal with non-payment cases, the most relevant issue is about possession and why the person or the family has been unable to pay rent. In the eyes of the law, we don't really care so much as to the reasons behind, but it's focused more on like whether you pay the rent or not, and when you'll be able to pay rent. And so that's a big concern for a lot of housing advocates at the moment because of the financial impact that COVID-19 crisis has caused in a lot of families across the country. And we are anticipating a high volume of eviction coming up when the courts reopen and when the shelter-in-place order gets lifted sometime in several months. But for now, it's really important to actually get connected with other services and even with our school partners to help stabilize our clients. We're seeing a lot of issues that have my colleagues on this presentation have talked about. So access to food is a huge issue, access to personal protective equipment, education. So really families with children, we have had issues about accessing Wi-Fi. The San Francisco Unified School District has now gone completely remote, but there are still issues in some communities where Wi-Fi access is unavailable I know they did a lot of outreach to families to give out Chromebooks so that they can resume distance learning. And it's really important to work with families generally, not just with their legal issues, but with all these other non-legal issues, because it's always a web, right? And it's always a constellation of non-legal issues that actually affect our ability to effectively represent their non-payment eviction cases. And so that could, in addition to those other issues that I have already flagged for you, that would include, family law issues. So if there's a domestic violence going on at home, if there's immigration issues, we're also seeing a lot of issues around public access to public benefits. We're seeing and hearing a lot of questions about stimulus payments. We've also heard of stories and complaints from clients being scammed of their stimulus payments that they've received. We're also hearing some discrimination happening on the ground, and so it's really important to help and assist families who are experiencing these issues if you are seeing them. And there are a couple of resources that are available to you, and I'm happy to provide them. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm happy to provide that on the chat box after I speak. But a couple of those resources include the National Housing Law Project. So the National Housing Law Project has a lot of information about eviction moratoria happening across the country. As I said, there's, outside of the public housing program and the federally subsidized housing programs, there's really no nationwide eviction moratoria. It varies state by state. It varies county by county. It can even vary on local jurisdictions or city by city, as is the case here in the Bay Area. There's also the American Bar Association. So I'm actually part of the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty. The American Bar Association is an organization or a membership organization of lawyers, and some of those lawyers actually work on homelessness issues or legal aid issues. And so to the extent that you have any questions or would like to be connected to an attorney, the ABA might have additional resources or might be able to connect you or the family that you're working with a lawyer in your local area. The other recommendation that I have is actually getting in touch with your local bar associations. So here in San Francisco, we're fortunate enough to have a very robust, active bar association that provides different services to low-income clients, including clients who are experiencing homelessness. And so that's another option that you might look into. And again, bar associations different across the country, depending on where you are, depending on your locality. But they may also have additional resources. And last but not the least, obviously, if you are working with families who are facing threat of evictions or who are experiencing housing instability, you might also refer them directly to your local court. So the Superior Court will probably have resources available to clients facing threats of eviction. I have to say that with the COVID-19 crisis, I think that this crisis really exposed how unprepared the legal system is. I think there's going to be access to justice issues in the next few months, thinking about how even if courts across the country switch to virtual online system, that really tends to favor individuals and families who only have access to Wi-Fi or to emails. And unfortunately, a lot of the clients I work with on the ground do not have that luxury. And so it's an ongoing challenge, and there is an ongoing advocacy in how to address these issues. And if you want to hear more, if there are, I'm working with the American Bar Association and developing some resources, and I'm happy to provide those once those are available. So if you have any questions, just let me know. I'm happy to provide those resources in the chat box.
Thank you, Michael. I just provided the National Law Housing Project resource link, and also the ABA Commission on Homelessness and Poverty. And I do believe the question that we have outstanding, and whoever on the panel would like to address this, please do. The question is regarding funding ideas for hotspots.
Yeah,
Jamie?
I can talk a little bit. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So, Jamie, thanks for bringing that question up. I know that in our district, we used quite a bit of Title I funds for our title schools, as well as for McKinney students to fund hotspots, as well as Chromebooks to make sure our students had access to that. So that is one of the funding I know that's allowable under. And then, yes, we also did the same thing it looks like Westminster is doing, Jamie, which is we had some local foundations that helped support those initiatives. And I do think, like, I know I've seen a lot of interest. And Jamie, if I can find some, I'll make sure it gets to you here in Colorado of foundations wanting to make sure that educational technology has been provided to students. I know that has come across my desk a little bit. So I will try to dig that up for you as well.
In Utah, we've had quite a few companies kind of step up. So T-Mobile is providing hotspots at a cheaper price for schools and school districts. So you might want to look into that. Also, under the education part of the CARES Act, those funds can be spent before the money is actually received. So again, so long as it can be tied to a need because of COVID-19, the CARES Act education funding can go towards technology and that without any issues. And that really is the broadest use of funds that you're going to be able to find in education, because your Title I is tied specifically to Title I purposes. Your McKinney-Vento is tied specifically to McKinney-Vento definition and rules. But the CARES Act is going to be the most broad. Now, having said that, Title I did broaden its scope of its use for funding. So you might want to look at that as well in terms of providing additional supports for your students in a situation like that, like with Chromebooks or hotspots or things like that.
Thank you, Jeff. And then I also see Leslie says, I would love any information regarding funding for hotspots in Colorado. Jamie, do you know any specifically in Colorado? We'll also provide education stabilization fund information following the webinar. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I think I've seen just in some research on grants. And Tisha, what I can do is once I find out, I'll send it to you and you can send it out, but I'll take a look. But I know I've seen a couple of educationally like opportunities for educational technology from some of the foundations that specifically support education K-12. So I will dig that up and send it to you, Tisha. Thanks for that question. Perfect,
thank you. Any additional questions? I think all the questions in queue have been addressed. If I don't see anything in the next second, why don't we go ahead and do a round of some final thoughts from our panelists. We'll go ahead and go in the order in which you all presented. Jeff, if you could give us some final thoughts.
The issues that come up because of the situation that we're in are so unprecedented in our time. When it happened 100 years ago, things were very different. And so we're really finding ourselves having to think as fast as we can as a system. And that's really a challenge because we're not used to doing that. And because we all work in systems, sometimes it takes forever to get through things, and we're finding that we have more red tape than we really want or need. So while that is a challenge, I cannot stress enough how important the work that we do, that you do, is for our students and families. Sometimes you're the only advocates for them. No one knows about their situation or the circumstances under which they're living except for you, and really they need your help. So we certainly appreciate all that you guys do, and I know that every single person on this panel, as well as every single person listening, probably does a lot of work that they never get credit for, but I know that it's because of who you are and how you want to live your life. And so I really appreciate that on a very personal level. So thank you for letting me participate with you guys.
Thank you, Jeff. And we do have another question in queue. Michael, if you could give us your final thoughts, and if you could check the chat message. Leslie has a question specifically regarding affordable housing and also families who may be in the extended stay hotels, motels.
Let me take a look at that. So in terms of final thoughts, just echoing what Jeff had said, I'm really grateful for the work that everyone in this presentation and also like all our audience participants are doing. As I said before, evictions have slowed down dramatically here in the Bay Area, and I'm assuming that will be the case across the country. However, I'm sure things will ramp up again in the next few months as the country tries to reopen. And I think the work that you're doing now is really important because every piece of it helps stabilize families. And again, the effective legal representation is predicated on having stable families and individuals in a stable place so that they can actually participate in their legal representation. So I really, really appreciate the work that you're doing. I know I'm just going to be super busy in the coming months once all of this is over. But I just want to echo what Jeff had said and really express gratitude to the work that you're doing. So going back to the question about affordable housing, I could probably send you some. I have to look up some of the resources, but the National Low Income Housing Coalition might have additional resources on this. If not, National Housing Law Project, I will look into that and get back to you.
Thank you, Michael. And if we could get some final thoughts from Carrie.
Thank you everyone for being here today. And I also echo everything Jeff and Michael said. It's really such a privilege to work with the McKinney-Vento liaison community. In terms of final thoughts, I would just say that it's a time now for, I think, tremendous amounts of creativity and collaboration. And I would really encourage you all to, those that are especially working in K through 12, to reach out to your community partners in the early care and education space. I think we have to figure out how to, as Jeff said, work quickly. We have to iterate. We have to not be afraid to try and fail so that we can really find what works. And then the other thing I would say is, network as much as you can with your colleagues. And as you find things that are kind of creative and interesting and working, we need to amplify each other and share that information as broadly as we can, because we just don't have time to kind of wait and vet things. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Carrie. And Jamie, if you could present us with some final thoughts.
Yeah, Michael, you brought up a really good point about how the legal system wasn't prepared. And I have to say, I think none of our systems were prepared. And I think personally, that's one of the things I've really been struggling with. And I think we all are, no matter our profession, no matter our industry. And so just know we're all into this together, just like we've all said. And then I just want to remind you to also take time for yourselves and not let yourself run too empty during these times, because it is a really challenging just point in history for all of us. And so just a reminder to take care of yourself as well and do those things that fill your gas tank. And thank you for everything that you're doing. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you to all of our panelists. And thank you to all of you who are doing all of the work on the ground. We appreciate you all so very much. These resources will be made available to you. Please keep checking out both the website resource page and then also the newsletters that come out. Also, in regards to self-care, one of our very own board members who is a homeless and foster care youth liaison out of California, she did a couple of yoga and meditation self-care sessions for us on Facebook Live. If you go to our Facebook page, you should be able to access that. Her information is also there if you want to check out her website on self-care. So thank you so much, everyone. Please be careful, be safe, be well. Bye-bye now.
Take care, everyone.